In today's Halloween special video, I'm going to be considering the philosophy of hauntology. No, we're not going ghost hunting in a spooky old house. This philosophy is about what we might call the ghosts of futures past, all those lingering traces of what could have been. We're talking about how these elements of the past, whether it's music or technology, even social structures, they sort of reappear in the present and influence our culture. You might call them what-if moments or stumbling across an old broadcast, like a dusty old recording from a future that never actually happened. It's that feeling, that lingering presence of what could have been, those unrealized potentials, those roads not taken, the futures that never quite materialized. It's almost like a déjà vu feeling, like you've experienced this without even knowing it. Some describe it as a kind of yearning for those unrealized futures, especially when it comes to technology. But it's not just nostalgia, since it also makes you think about why those futures didn't happen. For example, those retro-futuristic mid-century designs, like the Home of the Future exhibitions from the 1964 New York World's Fair, or scenes from 2001 Space Odyssey. Back then, they seemed so futuristic, but today, they just look kind of dated. The philosopher who coined the term, Jacques Derrida, introduced hauntology in his 1993 book, Specters of Marx. The name itself is a play on the word ontology, the branch of philosophy concerned with the nature of being, existence, and reality, which explores questions about what kinds of things exist, what their essential properties are, and how they relate to each other. By coining this term, Derrida wanted to make us think about those ghosts, the ghosts of possibilities, those lost futures, the paths not taken. Basically, hauntology wants us to think about what haunts us instead of what is. Derrida argued that these specters of the past, especially when it comes to, say, Marxism and its impact on Western society, they're really important for understanding our present. Derrida saw Marxism as haunting Western society from beyond the grave in a way that goes beyond a simple presence or absence. He uses the metaphor of a ghost to describe this complex relationship. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, many political thinkers declared Marxism dead. Derrida, however, argues that this death doesn't mean disappearance. Instead, it transforms Marxism into a spectral presence, a force that continues to shape our thinking and political landscape even in its supposed absence. Derrida saw Marxism as an unfinished project, a set of ideas and aspirations that continue to resonate despite the abject failures of its historical implementations. As they like to say in the comfy armchairs of the faculty lounge, they just weren't doing Marxism right. For Derrida, Marxism's ghost is intimately connected to the concept of injustices and how they continue to exist in various forms. He came up with a list of 10 plagues of the globalist system, such as the erosion of traditional employment structures, increasing economic disparity, wars fueled by the arms trade, the crippling debt burdens faced by many developing countries, and the rise of organized crime and its infiltration of political and economic systems. In essence, Derrida sees Marxism as a haunting presence that challenges us to confront these issues and to think critically about the present and to imagine alternative futures. In this way, we are reminded that history is full of these detours and unfulfilled promises and, well, hauntings, you might say. It's like when you look at those old sci-fi book and magazine covers with the flying cars and the chrome robots. That aesthetic, like Marxism, is dated, but it's also strangely alluring. This has even made it into popular culture in various ways. One thing that I've found interesting as a fan of electronic ambient music is how this complex philosophical concept has migrated to the music scene. In the early 2000s, music journalist Simon Reynolds noticed a trend, particularly in the UK, in electronic music that seemed to capture this feeling of what could have been, and he called it hauntological music. Artists began using sounds to create that sense of lost futures, those echoes of possibilities that just never quite materialized. Hauntological music often incorporates crackling vinyl, ghostly echoes, warped tape loops, and vintage synthesizers and drum machines. These songs often have this melancholic, kind of eerie quality to it, exploring themes of memory, loss, the passage of time. I'll put links in the description to some of the artists I like in this genre, such as The Caretaker, Burial, and Philip Jack. They're all considered pioneers of this sound, really capturing that feeling of lost futures in their music. There's also a strong connection between hauntology and post-war British culture, especially during the 1950s into the 1970s. Post-war Britain was a time of massive change with a lot of uncertainty. There was rebuilding the country while technology was advancing rapidly. There was this sense of both hope and anxiety about the future, providing a fertile ground for hauntology aesthetics to take root. One example of this is library music, those kind of eerie, sometimes nostalgic instrumental tracks that they used to use as background music or old TV shows and films. This music was provided by companies that created these vast libraries of pre-recorded music that filmmakers, TV producers, and radio stations could license to use in their productions. This music was designed to be functional, to set a mood, to provide some subtle background ambiance, but it often had this really evocative, sometimes unsettling quality that made it perfect for hauntological sampling. Another cultural touchstone are public information films, short films intended to educate the public on topics like safety, health, social issues. These films had a very particular tone, kind of like an unsettling blend of optimism and anxiety about the future. And they often presented these visions of the future that now seem so strange, like showing kids how to duck and cover if there's a nuclear attack. They're like little time capsules of those anxieties from a bygone era that might still haunt us today in unexpected ways. Also, these films, they often had these strange electronic scores and sound effects which really added to that hauntological atmosphere. During that era, there was a lot of experimental electronic music coming out of places, like the BBC Radiophonic Workshop in the UK. Composers like Delia Derbyshire, who created the iconic theme music for Doctor Who, really pushed the boundaries of sound design, creating otherworldly soundscapes. Speaking of Doctor Who, it's one of several classic British science fiction shows that tap into the hauntological aesthetic. Doctor Who, particularly the older episodes, Blake's 7, UFO in Space 1999, used lo-fi special effects along themes of time travel, dystopian futures, alternate realities, and a sense of melancholy and loss. The wobbly sets, that eerie electronic music definitely gave these shows that uncanny out-of-time feel, something that you may miss in today's CGI AI-generated shows. Even today, stories that explore the darker side of technological progress, such as Black Mirror, can be surprisingly thought-provoking when viewed through a hauntological lens. But viewing things in this way isn't about being an expert on a specific music or film genre or a time period. It's more about being open to those feelings of uncanny familiarity, the echoes of the past and the present, about recognizing how an imagined past can inform the future. And maybe, just maybe, by engaging with those ghosts of futures past, we can start to imagine and maybe even create a different future. Basically, hauntology isn't about dwelling on what could have been. It's about using those what-ifs to understand where we are and where we might be going. So, are you a fan of the music or retro sci-fi films and shows like I am? Do you think society today is haunted by the ghosts of futures past, as Derrida indicated? Do you think that viewing events through a hauntological lens is a valuable exercise or just nostalgia? Were there any other hauntological works you think I should have mentioned? Let me know what you think in the comments and subscribe to the channel to catch my upcoming episodes. Now I have to stop Matt, my robotic assistant, from binging on Doctor Who Cybermen episodes and getting bad ideas.